G'day legends, I hope that you're all doing well. Now, I may not have a video tomorrow as I am actually filming something else that will take up most of the day, but I think and I really hope that you will enjoy what I'm doing. Now today, we're going to talk over the maps, we're going to look at some tanks, we're going to look at some drone strikes, of course, some missile strikes, both into Russia and Russia into Ukraine. We're also going to have an update on then Prigozhin too, look at some destruction. But, of course, one thing we really need to talk about is some of the movements we're seeing Ukraine make. And as a lot of speculated, that have we entered the third sort of phase of this war, that it seems like these attacks, not only ground assaults, drone assaults, things like this have picked up dramatically in the past, say, 48 hours. And are we seeing this sort of decisive action take place? We've talked about, we see these attacks, but it doesn't really follow with much decisive action, but it does look like Ukraine has managed to do some more of this. And then we're going to look over some geo-confirmed footage, and this should be a concern for the Russians, as yes, it has taken Ukraine the best part of 3 months to get to the primary defense lines, but it has taken, some would say, 24 hours to start having breakthroughs there. And this is, like I've said again and again, offensive operations are like bankruptcy. It's little by little and then all at once. And it seems like we could be in this as well. So let's actually have a look over what has happened here. And it's around Verbove where we're talking about where has been geolocated. So we're going to jump onto the ISW map. We don't use this live map that much anymore because I prefer than the screenshot sort of versions of it. But we'll actually have a look over the rest of the maps just a little bit later on in the video. But we see this. This is, of course, Verbove. Where we're talking is Robotyne, so in the south of the Orikhiv front. So, and of course, this is Tokmak, which many will say is where Ukraine really strategically are trying to get to currently. But there has been this push right in here. Now, what it is worth noting is that this is only a reconnaissance team. So it's not a full brigade moving in, but we see then this footage here. And let me mute this. So we can just see, and this will be in the Telegram chat as well if you'd like to have a look, because I can't show the end of this. We see soldiers moving here. This is said to be from a Russian drone of Ukrainian soldiers. And then we'll see another pop-up blocks as well down here, and you'll see more people moving as well. If you watch it a few times, it is more obvious to start seeing. You see this sort of well-made track through here as well. You start seeing men move, soldiers move here, as well as here we see 1-2 bodies minimum. Here we go. I can't spot it perfectly, but just from what you can see, if you let your eyes sort of defocus and look for movement, you'll see maybe 3, 4, 5 people. And then I'm going to have to cut this off here because as they somewhat move into the open here, there is then some level of artillery assault. So again, like I said, this is a recce team. This isn't like a brigade. And it's said to be from Ukraine's 82nd Air Assault Brigade, which is one of Ukraine's most highly trained, best equipped and most capable units operating, which is now to say that these reserve troops, these highly trained guys, they're definitely now present on the front line, as there was some rumor about where that actually was. Has the reserves been taken out? Are they still in reserve? What is actually happening right there on these pushes? So some interesting things here. Let's have a look at some more photographs here. So the ISW, and someone has more put out these defensive works for me. So this is, of course, Verbove here, and this is on the same time where they have come through. So they've managed to skirt down around Russia's defensive works, around the Dragon's Teeth, around trenches, all this, and make this gap right down into here, really scouting around where this stuff is. But as well, this is just a recce team. So this is what I would call so far a tactical breach. It's a recon party. It's not a strategic breach of a battalion or brigade-sized element. To going in there, seeing what's there, so then those bigger elements can move through with tanks, targeting of artillery, things like this. But where you do see the artillery strike at the end, some of them do seem to take casualties there. So very interesting, but Ukraine is managing to push further and further in here with recce parties as well, getting around some of these lines. But a much larger brigade size, they won't be able to just scout down and around these defensive lines like so. But it is very interesting to see that then happening. Now, Australian weapons have been used for the first time in Russia and used by Russian volunteer corps. And we know Australia has supplied a lot of weapons to Ukraine to fight with, but this is the first time that at least I'm tracking that they've been used on Russian soil. So as well being used with the Russian volunteer corps, who has caught a lot of heat before using Western weapons inside Russia and has a very interesting background with some of the founding members as well. So let's actually look over this and some of the bits and pieces in here. So it was confirmed by the Australian ambassador, or the Ukrainian's ambassador to Australia, sorry. Cardboard drones from Australia used in attack on Russian airfield. Ukraine's ambassador to Australia, Vasyl, said the Kursk airfield was a legitimate target for Ukraine's armed forces. Russia uses that airport to launch military operations and send missiles into Ukraine. This is on his official Twitter page here. So then we'll have the Sydney Morning Herald, an Australian newspaper. Now, these attacks were from the 26th and 7th, I believe, but it's being reported through as there's more information now. That Australian cardboard drones have been reportedly used to help bomb a Russian airfield as the Ukrainian military steps up its attacks on Russian territory. Now, Ukraine has claimed it struck 5 fighter jets on the weekend, approximately 170 kilometres from the border. Now, these drones are said to have a range of about 120 k's, but that would be classified there as well. And this is then the cardboard drone. Cardboard drones work a lot better around things like radar too. So then saying tonight, Ukrainians use them in a swarm, mixing drones with warheads with empty drones. I don't know exactly what engines are on the drones, but if they're electric powered, then they were not launched from Ukraine. This, of course, being from then Fighter Bomber, who is a Russian fighter pilot, well, ex-Russian fighter pilot, who goes on Telegram, and that's where a lot of the confirmations come from as well. Now, these are made by Simpac as well. So, flat packs of $33 million donation of uncrewed aerial systems to Ukraine announced by the federal government in February. At the time, the government said the drones would provide a battlefield intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability to Ukraine. But it appears the drones are being used in an attack capacity, that they can carry up to 5 kilos of cargo as well. So we have this from March as well from 3AW, who's a radio show in Australia. Managing Director of Simpac, David Vicino, says the drones were supplied to Ukraine for humanitarian purposes, including delivering medical supplies, food and water. Ukrainian Ambassador to Australia, Vasyl, who we just spoke of, says they're being used by Ukrainian soldiers in a variety of missions, including lethal ones. Now, there's been no comments about these most recent attacks, but I am going through the motions now to reach out and actually see if I can, see about that company, what is going on, their feelings towards this, how that has gone from there. So nothing is saying that they're against this. It's just very interesting to then see. And the reason I'm talking about this today is, of course, this has popped up on the Russian Volunteers then Telegram official channel. So friends, the Russian Volunteer Corps is pleased to tell you about the next most successful attack carried out together with the military counterintelligence of the SBU in Kursk region, having crossed the porous border again without interference on the night of the 27th. We struck a military object with drones, an airfield with Putin's vultures. All intended targets were destroyed. We empathized legitimate goals that brought grief and death. Peaceful Ukrainian cities, elements of air defense, which covered the planes of the executioners, were also struck. By the way, covering up is a big word. She ended up only in an apartment building in Kursk. This is what a pitiful state, dangerous for the citizens themselves. The defense of the country reached. The governor of Kursk is lying that our drone crashed into a high-rise building and is interfering with the Ministry of Defense, which tried to keep silent about the damaged building and simply cover up its shame. So, talking about here, the Russian sky and Russian land do not belong to Putin's heathen, but then to the free people. So, of course, the RDK are Russians who are pro-Ukrainian, fighting back in Russia, mixed with a lot of foreigners too, and a lot of Poles and whatever in there as well, and do follow some ideological bits and pieces too. So then this was then released from inside Kursk, that from Kursk News, the forces attacked the Kursk region with a swarm of cardboard kamikaze drones, Surik reports M. According to the data, targets were the military electronic warfare unit in the Kursk region and the military airfield as well. Coming from Ukrainian News, last night counterintelligence SBU attacked the military drones airfield in Kursk. And then what has been released by the Kyiv Post is the SBU says in a nighttime raid, damaging 4 Su-30 fighter jets and 1 MiG-29, 2 Panzer S-1 close air defense systems, a radar of long-range S-300 surface-to-air missile system. So big hits there. There's no footage of these or photos of these being destroyed, but if that is correct, even if it's half of that, that is some very big losses there. Now, we have seen Western weapons not be really allowed to be used inside Russia, but could this be the start of a shift in that policy for more strikes further into Russia or into Russian territory? Now, there is some question about these being donated through federal permissions. It's a bit grey area there, but you need to remember that Australia, although we're NATO aligned, we're not actually a NATO country. And Australia has a thriving private defence industry, and things like this are the best free marketing fucking ever. For a $3,500 drone, amazing free marketing and doing work there too. So speaking of more attacks on Russian airfields, sorry, I need to drink my hot water to keep my voice going. We have clearer footage here of one of the IL-76s, said to be 4 taken out, but at least 2 confirmed. One of the footage of one of the IL-76s on fire from in the Peskov airfield from yesterday's attack, or at least over the last 24 hours. So very heavily damaged there. And this is what I was talking about. These are the IL-76s. Transport planes are very important. This is from early in the war. These are Russian paratrooping armoured vehicles here, loading onto these. Now, you notice parachutes on top here. Unlike most airborne forces around the world, the Russians can actually jump inside their vehicles. So, and there's a lot of worry about if something doesn't go wrong, instead of losing one guy if a parachute goes wrong, that you could lose a whole crew in one thing. But that would be a fucking wild ride inside of one of those Soviet-era vehicles, just hoping the parachute then deploys out. And there's further reports of more drone swarms heading west into Russia last night from Ukraine, and also missiles then into Crimea. So let's have a look at some of this. So this is Bryansk of a Ukrainian drone striking in Russia as well as in Crimea, said to be a missile on an electric facility. Here you can see lighting up blue. As we've seen, Russia has had an amount of attacks over the last 18 months of war against Ukraine's infrastructure, and Ukraine here is hitting Russian infrastructure in Crimea at power plants as well. Also, this has been a bit of a talking point of the day, is The Guardian has released footage of Kyiv last night of a successful strike here that it tends to look like, as we got reports that it was only debris that had fallen and injured and I believe killed 2 people as well. But this seems to be a clear strike, although it's not 100% confirmed. Maybe it was something, a further secondary explosion there too. But very interesting as well. There's been a lot of waves of attacks going into Russia more and more so, and there's a lot more than I'm just going to be able to show here. Now, Prigozhin. This video has come out. Now, this is said to be in Africa before Prigozhin's plane had gone down, but of course this has started the absolute tinfoil hat conspiracies of his death happening. And to be honest, the tinfoil hat conspiracy, I don't think a lot of it is too wild. Some people being like, I believe he's dead, but if he did pop up, I wouldn't be that surprised. The last thing you want is a leader of a PMC, any PMC, the last thing you want is to then become ultra famous. It really affects how you can operate, where you can operate, especially if you then get declared as a terrorist group. Prigozhin is worth well over $1 billion. He's got unbelievably deep connections as well. So could he pop up somewhere alive? I think it's unlikely, but it could happen. As we know, Russia's not letting any other international investigation get into the crash site, as well as the Brazilian company Embraer, the manufacturer of his private jet, aren't allowed to conduct an investigation either. So let's watch this video.
Жив я или нет, как у меня дела, сейчас выходные, вторая половина августа 23-го года, нахожусь в Африке, Поэтому любители обсуждения моей ликвидации, интимной жизни, заработков там или еще чего-нибудь, собственно говоря, все в порядке.
So it was said that that was filmed just before then he went back into Russia, and then that crash of his plane then happened. Now, 6 Ukrainian pilots have been reportedly killed when 2 military helicopters have crashed in Kramatorsk. According to the Ukrainian Pravda newspaper, the 2 Mi-8 helicopters are completely destroyed and the bodies of 6 dead servicemen were found. As well, I want to talk about some equipment going into Ukraine. So we know there's a lot of German stuff that could potentially be going into Ukraine as well. I have a list here of today that has been delivered. Is 10 Leopard 105s, 1 TRML-4D radar. Now that is part of the RST air defense system, 16 recon drones, over 13 million rounds of small arms ammo, 4 truck tractors, a trailer for these, and a field hospital. So set up for the full field hospital. As we know, Zelensky has talked a lot about the medical support is not just good enough in Ukraine currently for the frontline soldiers. Now, continuing on Germany. Germany, Rheinmetall, massive giga defense company making tanks, Leopard 1s, Leopard 2s, lots of other equipment. Now, RUAG, who is a Swiss defense company, owns 96 Leopard 1A5s that it bought from the Italian army as Italy was retiring its old tanks in the early 2000s. Weirdly, though, these Swiss-owned ex-Italian tanks still remain on Italian soil. So the deal being suggested, let me bring up this photograph here, and this is floating around all the Ukrainian pages of, to bag out Switzerland for, I guess, their neutrality in not supplying these. But the deal being suggested is that Greece would donate to Ukraine about 100 of its roughly 500 Leopard 1A5s, and then the compensation to Greece would be that Germany would then buy these 96 tanks off RUAG, which is the equal number that they'd then supply. They'd upgrade their tanks with new optics and then provide them back to then Greece. Germany for months has asked the Swiss to work with them on these ex-Italian tanks so that the Germans can actually supply them then into Ukraine. But the Swiss parliament has rejected the transfer, citing Switzerland's famous neutrality. So, furthermore, what I want to talk about is small boat operations. We saw there's a lot of talk about small boat ops. We've seen footage from Ukrainian special forces crossing to Crimea. We've seen footage of Ukrainians on small boats shooting at Russian fighter jets. We've seen Russian fighter jet HUD displays shooting at these small boats. Now, we have this from the Ministry of Defence of Britain. British commandos, Royal Marine Commandos, have trained 900 Ukrainian Marines to conduct beach raids and amphibious operations. The program is the first of its kind delivered by the UK, supporting Ukraine to develop its own marine force. So very interesting here in these small rib-style boats. And we hear more and more about this. We hear Sarah then having the public donations to buy boats for more amphibious crossings. And we could absolutely see something like this. 900 people, that is a hell of a lot of Marines. So let's stay on the MOD front. We have this as well. Intel update, the 25th of August, 2/3. 2 Russian soldiers were sentenced to serve at least 2 years in a penal colony, that sounds fun, by a military court for refusing to obey orders to return to the front line in Ukraine. On 18th of July 23, the Media Zone, a news outlet, reported that Russia was convicting close to 100 soldiers a week for refusing to fight. If this trend continues, there will be approximately 5,200 convictions a year for refusing to fight. The high rate of convictions demonstrate the poor state of morale in the Russian army and the reluctance of some elements to fight. Refusal to fight likely reflects the lack of training, motivation, and high-stress situations Russian forces face along the entire Ukrainian front. Although some soldiers have refused to fight and attrition rates remain high, Russia highly likely mitigates their loss by committing a mass of poorly trained soldiers to the front line. Since Russia's September 22 partial mobilization, Russia has adopted its approach to warfare by utilizing sheer mass for offensive and defensive operations. We've seen this all through Russia's history, using mass of actual forces and with very high then attrition rates. But this is no surprise. But if we say that then a battalion is around 500 guys, we're talking then about 10 battalions of convictions a year. But every time I talk about this, of something like that Russia's morale is low, a lot of people point back at me and go, that's just a propaganda tool to say that it's low from there. But we have seen a lot of videos coming out even from as high up as Prigozhin, but all the way through to other soldiers saying they're not getting gear, that they're being left out on their own. But we do know that there are some other videos showing more higher morale too. So it's definitely changes of where on the front line that is, and unit to unit. We know unit to unit has a big effect, especially in the Russian military, for funding, morale, capability, absolutely everything. Commanders. So LNG, liquid natural gas, is going to become a huge topic again as Europe starts cooling off over the next couple of months and going then into winter. And absolutely, they got through last year, but it was actually a relatively warm winter. But prices did increase across Europe for gas drastically. So let's have a look at this by the Financial Review, called EU Imports Absurd Amounts of LNG from Russia, Putin's War Chest. So in the first 7 months of the year, Belgium and Spain were the second and third biggest buyers of Russian LNG behind China, according to the analysis of industry data. But overall, the EU imports, the superchilled gas, were up 40% between January and July this year compared to the same period in 2021 before Russia's full-scale invasion. So before the war and to now, that is up 40% for EU imports. The jump comes from a low base as the EU did not import significant amounts of LNG before the war in Ukraine due to its reliance on piped gas from Russia. So as well, with a lot of these titles, you need to then further look into it and see what's actually coming. So yes, the super chilled gas is up 40%, but that's is being shipped across because we know then the pipelines have been taken out. Like nod, wink, wink at where that then happened. But the rise is sharper than the global average increases in imports of Russian LNG, which was 6% over the same period. Fossil fuel campaigner at Global Witness said, "It is shocking that countries in the EU have worked so hard to wean themselves off piped Russian fossil fuel gas only to replace it with the shipped equivalent. It doesn't matter if it comes by pipeline or boat. It still means European companies are sending billions to Vladimir Putin's war chest." EU policymakers have been urging European companies not to buy Russian LNG. EU officials have pointed the overall effort to phase out Russian fossil fuels by 2027, but warned that an outright ban on LNG imports risked prompting an energy crisis akin to last year when the EU gas prices hit record highs of more than €300 per megawatt hour. Now, a lot of the blame here is falling on Belgium and Spain, but Belgium and Spain have basically come back and said, that's just because we're buying it and then you're buying it off us. It's not just used from us. So yeah, you're sort of throwing us under the bus, but you're buying it off us. And just because you buy gas off Belgium that Belgium bought off Russia doesn't mean that's instantly you're completely innocent, if that makes sense from there. And there's a lot of this around fossil fuel campaigns and things then of this nature. But let's just have a look at the maps. If I've got no more things to talk about, I don't believe that I do. Let me know if I've missed something. Let's have a look at the maps. And of course, we have Ukraine in the center, the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22 and the purple since 14. We have Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. And there's been a lot more equipment being moved into Belarus as geolocated footage has shown Russian equipment moving across there too. So there has been a lot of talk that there is more movement on the left bank here of Kherson. And we do have this from the ISW. W said that Russian reporters have said that Ukrainian troops landed to the northwest of Pidstepny here. So, of course, this is Pidstepny up here, then in this region that have made landings there. And we did see that Ukraine had got geolocated this small bridgehead here across the Antonivka, Oleshki left bank there as well. But no major shifts on any of the maps there. Now, of course, I talked about this in the beginning, but we're going to talk about Robertini, this move into Vrbove. So, of course, Deep State doesn't show it like the other maps may, but they see this major shift then into the east, further pushing into Vrbove. And, of course, we see down on then Daily Ukraine Map Update. Let's go into the same area. What do we see? We see a large push there. We see a lot more of a push in that region. Ukraine taking more and more ground. As we know, that's where one of the main big pushes is. And let's just have a look right here, coming in between then these main defensive works here as well, at least the primary defensive works in this area. So let's have a look at what the ISW has said today. ISW has said yesterday. So of course, yesterday on the left. And as we can see, Down to the south, not too much change, but we do see where this Recce party then pushed in. But the outskirts of Robertini are still definitely contested as well, though Ukraine does have the whole centre part of Robertini. But this part here, this is really what the interesting bit is, this push then into Verbovi by the recon team. So let's have a look then at what the Robar Russian sources says. So of course today's on the right, yesterday's on then the left, and it does show that Ukraine has had major success pushing further then into Robertini as well. Now let's look at what then Surak Maps shows and says, and they show the same thing of this push into Verbove. I actually believe this one showing the most amount of sort of grey zone push in as well. Ukraine Russian war, day 552, situation on Zap front. During the last hours, Russian army continued retreating towards the first main defense line as Ukrainian army not only increased the probing attacks, but also managed to set a foothold behind the line, which means the line suffered the first breach. We're going to pick up from Robertini and move further into then the east. Now we come to Avdiivka, where we have seen some minor changes here. So near Nevelsky, we do see this change here that Russia did lose some ground, coming back into then this tree line from this sort of horn that they had made out there. And as we'll see over this map, that Russia has lost a bit of ground over today. Ukraine has made some more shifts. So if we keep moving to the north from here, we have Krasnohivka here as well. And it does show that this area, so Krasnohivka is here. This is Surak Maps. That Ukrainian-Russian war, situation north of Avdiivka, Ukrainian army recaptured positions at the railway north of Krasnohivka. So we'll see then get the railways up. Now we have the terrain map. You can see this is then the railway here, that Ukraine has got back some ground here. So this wasn't shown originally on the deep state map, but Surak showing it from there. So then we'll continue pushing up into Bakhmut. As we know, there's been some changes here too. Now the deep state doesn't show any changes. We come onto then the daily Ukraine map update, and this actually does show an interesting update around Klishkivka, that Russia actually made some more ground out from Klishkivka there too. But we do have around Druzhba, we have one from of course Surak Maps as well. Now where is Druzhba? We come down into this sector. Now what we're going to look at is where this road sort of S's around, and we've seen a lot of fighting in and around this region to the south of course Bakhmut. Now they say here, situation south of Bakhmut, Ukrainian army recaptured some positions close to the water channel of this in Druzhba. So we're talking where there's snakes around here, and we can see multiple water channels. Go onto the satellite map. We see the water channels around where this S bends here. So Ukraine did make some gains around on this S. We see that Russia had some territory. Now as well, we're going to keep moving north, as we have seen another small shift as well near Svatov. So we can step back to yesterday. We do see that Russia lost some ground in and around here. We know this area has had a lot of fighting, a lot of contest as well. As we see then on the daily Ukraine map update, this come through as well. So see yesterday till today. So yesterday till today. So more of a shift there, that Ukraine made some ground, but the rest of the map doesn't show any difference up around Kupiansk, where there seems to be a lot of Russian soldiers as well, but no changes across any of the maps in that region. But legends, that is it from me today. I hope you enjoy yourself. If you'd like to support me, please see the links down below. I won't be videoing tomorrow or maybe the next day, but if anything major come through, I will surely update you as quickly as possible. Thank you very much for your time. Cheers. Bye-bye.